Good day, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to yet another edition of Truth to Power. My name is Faraz Patel. I will be in your company for the next 1 hour. Now, in the 2019-2020 financial year, close to 49 people were murdered on farms. Now, crime statistics and crime has become an everyday occurrence in South Africa. But once it starts hitting the bread basket of South Africa, stuff like food security and livelihoods become one of those topics. It starts to become in danger, and there has to be something that needs to be addressed to make sure that the farmers of our country, of all creeds and color, of all genders, are protected, especially now with droughts that are starting to affect South Africa in terms of a lack of rainfall, especially in the inland areas. So how do we go ahead and address the situation? How do we go ahead and curb farm murders, and farm attacks? That is the question that we are going to be discussing right here on Truth to Power. So let me introduce my guests. First off, I have Dr. Lennox Mchagi. He is the president of the Black Farmers Association of South Africa. And I also have Mr. Ernst Ruetz. He is the head of policy for AfriForum. Good day, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us here on Truth to Power.
Thank you very much.
Right, Dr. Mchagi, this is a question for both you and Mr. Ruetz. It's no exaggeration that the attacks on farms and the murders of farms is something that is quite big. How big is it from gentlemen like yourself who have this vast knowledge within the agricultural sector? I'm going to start off with you, Dr. Mchagi, and then the same question to Mr. Ruetz.
Number one, from our side, a murder is a murder, irrespective of color. Someone that commits a murder needs to go to jail. But also we need to find out the root cause of these murders that are happening to the farms. Because for me, as a president of the Black Farmers Association, I get a lot of calls from people calling me with abuse on the farms and all that result to murder, you see. And some of these abuse are not reported to the police because people are scared. If I report my boss, I'm out of work or I suffer more abuse. So if we can address those things, I think we can drop the rate of the murder by reducing it, by getting actually to the root cause of this.
Mr. Ruetz.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I think it is a very serious problem. Not only do I think so, the numbers are there for everyone to see. If you take police statistics over a period of 2 decades, what the police have found, or what the statistics say, is that on average, as I said, over about 20 years, there has been about 2 farm attacks per day in South Africa, and about, if you round it off, about 2 farm murders per week in South Africa. So it is a very serious problem. I'm not so convinced about abuse, worker abuse, as one of the major causes. I'm not saying it's irrelevant. The reason why I'm not so convinced that it is a major cause is because it has been investigated by a commission of inquiry that was initiated by government. And they have found that, I believe the number, I can get the exact number for you, but I believe the number of farm murders, and they had interviews with the attackers themselves, and they asked them, why did you do this? Why did you attack this farmer? And the amount who said that they committed this attack because of labor-related issues or abuse was about 1.2%. So yes, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying it's a very small component of the bigger picture.
Mr. Ruetz, political, and we need to try and separate political from just pure criminality. Now, there are, from what we read, certain farm attacks where it's just pure criminality. But how does one strike the balance between criminality and political? How much political influence is there in these farm attacks?
Well, there hasn't been a substantive finding or a study that quantifies that to say how much of these attacks are motivated politically. The one that has been done to that extent, I believe, has some, it's open for criticism. I think we need to differentiate between farm attacks as a phenomenon, a crime phenomenon, as opposed to individual farm attacks. And what I mean by that is you can say as a crime phenomenon, something such as labor-related issues does play a role, and politics does play a role, and racism does play a role. But that doesn't mean that it's the case for every single farm attack. So there are many farm attacks or farm murders where political issues are irrelevant, or racism is irrelevant. It had nothing to do with racism or labor-related issues. So we need to look at each case individually, but then, as I said, as a bigger crime phenomenon, we should consider or accept that there are different variables that do play a role and that do contribute or can contribute to this phenomenon.
Dr. Mchagi, do you feel that there is a hint of political sort of influence in these farm attacks, or like Mr. Roots is saying, do we just look at it in terms of this is just criminality, it's a bunch of criminals who say, right, this is the farm we're going to attack, and they go ahead and do it?
I think it's racism plays a big role in these matters. And also robbery plays also a big role. There is no political influence into matters that are taking place on these farms. We have to look at two things: racism and robbery, and also another one, the abuse that is taking place on the farm. Those three things are those that are led to these matters on the farms. And also, in order for us to stop this, because we are also human beings, irrespective of it does not happen too much to this race, it happens to that race. At the end of the day, we need to play the role of Ubuntu. And that role of Ubuntu takes two, it does not take one. In order for the farmers also to feel covered by black farmers, they need to change their attitude towards black farmers so that we can work together. That is why today, if you look at the stats, the stats will show it's those that are affected, it's more white than the blacks, of which I agree with that part. The reason that it's not too much of the blacks, because the blacks applies the spirit of Ubuntu. If that spirit can be applied also by our commercial farmers, they will not have the situation can change, you know. But right now, as things are standing, instead of changing, it's climbing. It's climbing. We need to address those things. If those things can be addressed, I don't think, I know one thing, our people protects their boss at all times, because of if the boss has got Ubuntu, they will protect the boss against crime and all the other stuff. It goes like that. I am a leader of 50,000 black farmers. I've been there, I've listened to them, they have put their views, and we have addressed our views. If a boss of a farm is doing wrong things to the people, I do call that boss to order, and we address the matter, and it does not lead to murder and other serious offenses. But what I can tell you is that we are against of farm killings, but also we need to rectify these racial issues and abuse on the farms.
And Dr. Mchagi, you know, you're speaking about the 50,000 membership that you have within your organization. You do say that there are some members who go ahead and come to you with complaints of the abuse that is happening within the farms. But what happens to the rest of them, those who are potentially afraid of losing their jobs, those who say, well, I don't want to do it because the livelihood of my family, because it's not just one employee that's working on the farm, it's an employee and his family who potentially occupy a certain section of the farms. So how much of fear is driven within these workers to say, well, we don't want to go ahead? And what needs to be done in order to change that, Dr. Mchagi?
You know, number one, I think the farmers need to allow the workers to have a union so that the workers can report such abuse to the unions. But what will happen, they will agree on the table, but on their farm, they will say, year of May plus, exubni the union year of May plus. Then it becomes a problem, you know? And I think if they can agree to transparency, things will work better, and the people will have no fear of losing their jobs. And abuse is an abuse. And let us not let the abuse to escalate to murder, you know, because most of these farm attacks, there's the attacker is related to a laborer, some of them, you see. So that raises eyebrows, because if you were treating fair that laborer, it was not going to escalate. Or laborers did hear that something is going to happen. Kos was beaten up. Now Kos's brother is taking a beat, is coming for bus. Those things shouldn't have happened if the laborers, there was a relationship, a good relationship between the farm owner and the labor. So if we can root out that mentality of I'm the boss, I cannot listen to laborers, and laborers don't have rights, I think we can get somewhere, but we will never get anywhere if that mentality is still there. We will never get nowhere. Currently, things that are happening right now, you know, I get a lot of calls. Currently, we are busy with a professor, Professor Helen Rees. Professor Helen Rees is the chairperson of the board of SAPRA. Professor Helen Rees, one of the things that she was put in to do was to follow up transformation in regarding to the cannabis. The cannabis, she took the cannabis industry, she gave it to one side, to the white people. White people never fought for the cannabis to be legalized, but today they are the ones that are sitting with that, you see? So things like that, we as black farmers are touching us. Hence, we decided to take a national march. A date will be set next week for that national march. She must be removed. We are going to make an example with people like that. She's a professor. She's supposed to uphold the law of South Africa. So we as the black farmers, we are going to march to Wits University. And on top of that, we are going to the union building. And the NPA was also used in this to shield black people not to get licenses. So we want justice. And the way we are going to handle this, it is something that is going to be one of the first things that are handled in our country, because there's monarchs that are going to go to that march as well, you know? So we need, if Ernst Roos wants this thing to be finalized in the right way, we need to work together. I'm prepared to sit in these committees to make sure that there's fairness, and we talk to the people, these murderers are stopped. And if the people are allowed to complain when they are treated unfair, and then I think I can be part of that. But if we are not part of that, this thing is still going to happen. There must be transformation in this industry.
Dr. Mchagi and Mr. Roets, we'll be coming back to you after this break. I'll be coming to Mr. Roets immediately after the ad break to have the discussion with regards to farm killings, farm murders, and of course, the abuse that is happening currently on farms. Stay tuned to Truth to Power. Welcome back to Truth to Power. I'm currently in conversation with Dr. Lennox Mchagi, the president of the Black Farmers Association of South Africa, and Mr. Ernst Roets, the head of policy for AfriForum. Mr. Roets, Ubuntu. From the experiences and the discussions you've been having with farmers that you associate, obviously, and have discussions with, is Ubuntu something that's a problem, or has it been practiced by the farmers along with their employees?
Well, I think we should talk about Ubuntu and what does it mean. I also think I need to respond to some of the comments that were made.
Sure, no problem. Go ahead, Mr. Roets.
And I think it links to the question of Ubuntu. I have three problems with the line of reasoning that we heard now. The one is, and I've said this at the beginning, and it seems like it didn't really sink in, so I'm going to say it again, that there was a commission of inquiry ordered by Minister Steve Tshwete. They looked at 2,631 farm attacks. And their conclusion was that, and I said 1.2%, the actual number I looked it up now is 1.6% of these attacks are as a result of labor-related issues. So I don't think it's appropriate to come on an interview like this and say the majority of these cases are because of abuse or labor-related issues, unless you can say, well, this research is wrong and you've done your own research to indicate that. The second thing is I also think it's inappropriate to say, when we talk about a problem like this with people being murdered and raped and tortured, to say the solution is that the victims must have an attitude change. I think it would have been very inappropriate for me to say, and especially this was made in a racial context, it would have been very inappropriate for me to say, well, the solution to farm murders is easy. Black people must have an attitude change. I think it's inappropriate. That's not my position. I think it's equally inappropriate to say that farmers need to have, if they want farm murders to stop, they need to change their attitudes. That's like saying, yes, violence against women and children is a problem in this country, but we need to talk about women's attitudes. I don't think that's the way to deal with it. And the third point is about blaming the victim. I mean, we can blame the victim, but blaming the victim is not solving the problem. We should look at what the crime phenomenon is, and I don't think you can really blame the victim by suggesting without any evidence that the majority of these cases are because of farmers abusing their workers. We do know in 80% of the cases, according to the research, the farmers didn't know the attackers. And we know, I mentioned this commission into farm attacks, which found that 1.6%. It's it's about, it's almost 1 out of 100 are cases that are related to labor issues. So no, blaming the victim I don't think it's appropriate, and I don't think that's going to solve the problem. In saying that, I'm not saying that there aren't problems that have to do with labor issues or abuse. Yes, that's a problem. But if you want to deal with it as a problem in an interview like this, you at least need to substantiate that with some form of evidence.
Okay, so Mr. Roets, Dr. Mchagi said that when he had some of his members coming to him and the farm owners were saying, and correct me if my Afrikaans is wrong, ons wil nie unions op hierdie farms hê nie. Is that something that you have witnessed or experienced with regards to the discussions that you had of farm owners, or are farm owners allowing unions and allowing some representation for the farm workers to happen?
I'm sure there are cases where that has happened, and where that has, in other words, where it has happened that the farmers have said they don't want unions, and where that has happened, I believe it's wrong. I am not aware of a case where that has happened, and why I'm not aware is because I've spoken to a lot of people. We have 260,000 members, and I also speak to farmers regularly, and I haven't spoken to anyone who have said to me that they don't allow unions. The discussions we have is often about what the demands of the unions are and how do they respond to the demands of the unions and so forth. I think that's the vast majority of cases. But where it happens, again, it can be the case, and I'm sure it is the case in some isolated incidents, where farmers say they're not going to accept any unions, and then that is an incident, that's a case that should be dealt with. But that doesn't mean that is why we've had almost 3,000 farmers murdered in the last few decades. The two aren't connected. It's just the one doesn't justify the argument doesn't justify the conclusion.
Dr. Mchagi, whether it's the killing of the farmers and their families, and as Mr. Roets is saying, the torture and the rape, because these are the current lived realities that farmers are experiencing, whoever the attacker is. whether it is, of course, the employee, whether it is the farmer, have the police done enough? Because last week we did see Minister Becky Cele attend one of the farms in KwaZulu-Natal and, of course, had some sort of an imbizo with the farmers. Have the SAPS done enough to protect, be it the farmers or be it the employees of these farms?
In response to that, the SAPS will never be able to fight this alone, because there are hidden agendas to this, whereby farmers are not, laborers are not allowed to talk to the police when an incident took place. So those are the things that we need first to iron out. Also, Mr. Rhodes, the report that the report that you are relying on is very old. That a report that you are sitting, that was conducted by the late Steve Tshwete. It's an old one. Let us look at the new report, whereby you can see for yourself the root cause of these murders. I mean, of these murders caused by these murderers. As I said before, we condemn killings of any race. Killing does not sort anything. It makes people poor. That is what it does, because those families that are losing their loved ones, sometimes, mostly it's breadwinners, and we don't want to go in there. But what I want to say, if AfriForum is serious about changing the attitude of their members that are farmers, they need to work with black farmers in order to iron out those, because the people that are laborers are blacks. So if they think they can handle that alone, these matters are still going to escalate. Let us come with an amicable solution. Also, number one, in order to get to that amicable solution, we need to have people that are willing to change. If you don't want to change, you will be wasting my time and your time. Because when you change is inside you. Notice, it's not something that one can see, but action can tell that there's a change here. So that the farm, these farm owners need to be taught to change. And in order to do that, they need to also to be taught what is the spirit of Ubuntu. If they can have that, that is key. They can, a spirit of Ubuntu is key for life. I want to know, Mr. Rhodes, do you know what is the meaning of Ubuntu?
Mr. Rhodes, I'm going to leave it up to you to answer all of that.
Yes, I wrote a chapter on Ubuntu in my master's dissertation. I know what Ubuntu is. I do, however, also know that it's a term that is, speaking at least from a legal perspective, is hard to define, or at least it's hard to apply in a legal system. I think that's the challenge of applying it when you say we have a legal system with laws and so forth, but then we also talk about the spirit of Ubuntu. And sure, I mean, who would be against that? Yes, we need to respect each other, and we need to work together, and we need to treat each other as brothers. That's of course that we need to do that. I still think if we're talking about a changing of behaviors or a changing of attitudes, why are we not talking? Why aren't we saying that maybe the perpetrators should change their attitudes? I find it alarming that we have a case of people going onto other people's property, torturing them, raping them, and the response to that is the victims need to change their attitude. Yes, and I'm not saying there aren't problems that we need to deal with. I think it's highly inappropriate to talk about a crime phenomenon such as this, where little children are being murdered, shot dead in front of their parents, or their parents are shot dead in front of them. We've had cases of children being drowned in boiling water. We've had cases such as this. And to say, well, yes, when we talk about what should be done, the solution is the victims need to change their attitudes. I think it's highly inappropriate. And yes, I'm not saying there aren't problems that we need to deal with. I think if there has to be an attitude change, it would be with the perpetrators. And I think the politicians who are romanticizing this type of violence, that's primarily where we need an attitude change. And I think this whole thing, if we talk about abuse on farms and labor issues and unions being denied, I'm not denying that it exists in some cases, that this problem is a problem. I'm denying the extent of the problem. So if we want to talk about the extent, or at least I'm challenging the extent of the problem. So if we want to talk about the extent of the problem, then we need to have some form of evidence to say, well, there was a study done, this is what was found, as opposed to making sweeping statements. I don't think we're going to find a solution if we make sweeping statements and we just blame the victims.
Mr. Roets and Dr. Mchagi, after the break, we will be continuing this conversation with regards to farm killings and murders. Stay tuned to ITV Networks. Welcome back to Truth to Power. My name is Faraz Patel. I am still in conversation with Ernst Roets. He is the head of policy at AfriForum, and Dr. Lennox Mchagi. He's the president of the Black Farmers Association of South Africa. Mr. Roets, before I go to Dr. Mchagi, the question with regards to the SAPS. Last week, the Imbizo that happened in one of the farms in KwaZulu-Natal. From an AfriForum's perspective, were you convinced by what the conversations between the farmers and Minister Becky Cele, and what more needs to be done from an SAPS perspective?
I think the minister has made it clear that he does not regard this as sufficiently as a problem. He's literally said that he doesn't think that farm attacks should be responded to as a priority. It shouldn't be a priority crime. I also think the comments that were made by the minister, where a person asked about livestock grazing on his land, on his property, and how should he deal with that if it's someone else using his property without his permission, and the minister responding with "how dare you" and comments like that. I think it escalated friction. It would have been better in this case if there was no meeting at all. I don't think the meeting was good for relationships. I don't think it was good for race relations. It wasn't good for trust in the police. And it's very unfortunate. I think the minister should retract the comments he made, because from what he said, the message he conveyed at least was that he does not take this problem seriously, and that he doesn't intend on taking it seriously.
Dr. Mchagi, a few months ago during a National Assembly sitting, the Minister of Agriculture, Minister Toko Didiza, of course, had some sort of a reactive attitude with regards to what is happening in the farms in South Africa. From the Black Farmers Association of South Africa, what more needs to be done from government, especially the Department of Agriculture, in trying to make sure that peace is brought within the farms and that there is a sense of equality and an understanding, or as you said, the Ubuntu that could be found between workers and those who they work for?
I think to answer to that, we need to lecture the farmers to transform. Transformation is not just a word. You must live transformation. Transformation, it's very easy if you allow that things have changed. In order for you to live the life, you need to adjust. So I think if the farmers can get together with the black farmers and work together, not to put a red tape to black farmers can assist in this matter. Because right now, some other farmers are killing people, shooting them on the farms, and say they thought it was a baboon, whereas it was a human. You know, those are the things that people don't talk about. but things that are coming to us. If we want to change this industry and these killings, I think we should work together. They must be prepared to work with Black people, and vice versa, Black people will work with them. And also, let me put them on a task. Right now, everyone knows that Black people were jailed for dacha. But now that dacha is taken out also by a professor, Professor Helen Rees of Wits University, giving it to white people. How does that go down with the Blacks that were jailed for it, you know? And so for starters, let those farmers come on board, join us to our march to Wits University and the union buildings. Then we will see that if they say they are against racial and non-transformable people like Helen Rees and others, let us have one task together. Let them join us to this march to union buildings, and also to the NPA, because the NPA was in this meeting. We want to know what is their reasons for them to be in that meeting, you see. And also the president's office was also sitting in that meeting. We want to know what were they doing in that meeting that we had with SAPRA. And also the Wits University, we want the Wits to strip Professor Helen Rees all her credentials for what she has done. So if AfriForum is against people that are doing such things to Black people, I will make my call. Our constituency with the United House of Monarchs, it's more than 850,000. And I'm a national chairperson of that United House of Monarchs. I will make the call to them to say, let's get together. Let's work with the white farmers. Let the white farmers also work with us, and also let's protect them, you see? Because we cannot protect people that don't want us. I can only protect them if they come on board to this march. Then I will see that there is a solidarity between the Blacks and the whites. And it's supposed to be like that. We are all farmers. We differ with one thing, that Black people don't have land, and the land was taken by the very same farmers, you know? But if they can show the spirit of Ubuntu, of standing together against racism, I think we can reach a point of working together. And I'm putting them on this test. Next week, we are setting up a date for a national march to SAPRA and to union buildings. After union buildings, Wits University. So those four places and the NPA. So if AfriForum and their affiliates are saying that they are not racist, they don't support such things, and they want these murderers to be put behind the bars, we will give the same support to them, to have these murderers behind the bars. But as things, the way are standing, we cannot support people that don't support us. That's a straightforward thing.
Mr. Ritz, your answer to that, and also, you know, whether Minister Toko Didiza herself in the Ministry of Agriculture has taken what is going on in the farms seriously.
Well, I don't think the minister is taking it seriously. I don't think government is taking it seriously. And I'm very alarmed by what Dr. Machugi has said, because if he believes that farm murders is Black people murdering white people for political reasons, he should just say it. Because we're talking about a crime phenomenon and how do we deal with a crime phenomenon. And he uses the opportunity to talk about how do we prevent crime to make political speeches. And he literally said that white farmers need to transform, which means that he regards this as political. If white farmers want farm murders to stop, they need to transform. And he even went as far as saying, and I wrote it down, that black farmers will protect white farmers if they come on board. So what is he saying? He's saying that black people are murdering white people for political reasons. That's what he's saying. Is that really what you believe, Doctor?
Doctor?
Can I say something?
Okay, please do.
Can I respond? Number
Yes,
one,
please.
don't put words into my mouth. What I said is this. White farmers need to work with the black farmers. And the black farmers will be able to protect them in terms of these cases. Because if we are working together, we will come with a plan of dealing with these perpetrators. And also, we can force the government to put police on the farms. That is what I was saying, but and also another thing that I want to put straight to you, I'm not a politician, and the Black Farmers Association of South Africa is not affiliated to any political party. So let's rule that out, that the politics, we don't have politics. This is straight business talk, no politics involved.
Dr. Mchagi and Mr. Ernst Roets, we're going for another break. After we come back, we'll be wrapping up the conversation with regards to farm killings and murders that is happening across South Africa. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Truth to Power. My name is Faraz Patel. I'm in conversation with Dr. Lennox Mchagi, the President of the Black Farmers Association of South Africa, and AfriForum's Head of Policy, Mr. Ernst Roets. Gentlemen, I think if there's one thing that we all can agree on is that as citizens of South Africa, the Constitution must be respected in all aspects. And I think all three of us can agree on that. Now, there is Section 25 of the Constitution that does talk about land expropriation without compensation and, of course, the potential for it to be amended. Mr. Roets, I'm going to start off with you. And I know that from AfriForum's policies, from AfriForum's ideas, that this is something that holds reservation, that I think that from looking at the way, obviously, the discussions have been going with regards to your organization, land expropriation without compensation is not a solution to South Africa and solving out the land scenario. Mr. Roets, if it does get amended, is that something that from an AfriForum perspective that you guys as an organization fear? Is that something that you fear? Because there's no escaping that, of course, colonialism and apartheid had reared its ugly head. That is something that we cannot escape. So with regards to land expropriation without compensation, is that something from an AfriForum perspective that you fear?
Well, I think, yes, we do think it will be disastrous for the country for a variety of reasons. And the important thing when we talk about land reform is we need to differentiate between restitution and redistribution. Restitution in this context, at least, is to say, because you are white, we put a question mark over the legitimacy of whether you own the property legitimately. So it doesn't matter if you bought the property. The fact that you are white and you own property means that that's a problem. And that's racist. That's just what it is. To say that the color of your skin determines whether you are a legitimate owner of the land or not. Restitution is something else. Restitution is to say that it is to recognize that there were injustices in this country in the past. There were injustices with regard to land, and those injustices have to be corrected. But that does not mean that all people who belong to a particular racial category have to be punished because they belong to that racial category. Restitution is supposed to mean that let's look at what actually happened on a particular piece of land. Did it happen on this piece of land that there was a community, or there was a black farmer or a black community or a black family who lived there who were dispossessed as a result of apartheid laws and so forth? Did this happen on this piece of land? If the answer is yes, then there has to be restitution. Then the land has to be given back, or the people need to be compensated financially if that's what they prefer. And so that's how we deal with it. We cannot simply say because you are white, that means you stole the land. That's just wrong. It's racist and it's theft to try to argue that that land must be taken back just because the owner is white.
Dr. Mchagi?
Okay. the land expropriation without compensation, with the government or without the government, is going to take place.
Right.
A reason for that, our people's land was taken, and Mr. Watts know, you can come up with a lot of defense mechanism and that. In our history, I've never heard of any of our black people that was compensated for the land that was taken from them. So the land expropriation, the land expropriation will take place without the government or with the government. We are proceeding. Right now, we've got a case, two cases. In Swellendam, Gian Groenewald of Swellendam, he owns Oak Tree Transport. We are expropriating his land. He defrauded black people 4.1 million. Him and Juan Colin, both of them. So cases like that, we want to make an example of the people that are taking, stole the land from the blacks and think they can still continue doing what is wrong. I don't compromise with that. If you stole the land, that land must go back to black people so that our people's dignity can be restored. The reason our people are not taken care of, are not treated as human beings is because of they don't have land. So let us, and the government did make a call before that, those that are sitting with big pockets of land should give the land back to the people. And also when the government said willing buyer, willing seller, as agreements were there, those that were selling, they sold the land for ×2 or ×10 the price of that land. So the government decided to stop that and say, okay, land expropriation without compensation, and I fully support that. Land must go back to the rightful owners so that our people's dignity can be restored with immediate effect. We as the Black Farmers Association of South Africa, we will champion that. Without the government or with the government, we will do that. I will deploy 850,000 masses from the United House of Monarchs and our 50,000 members to join that fight. Because reason things are still standing the way they are after 26 years, those farmers don't respect black people. They don't respect them. So in order for our people to gain their dignity, expropriation of land without compensation, it's good. That's the route to take.
Okay, wait, Dr. Mchagi,
that are white, that are with the Black Farmers Association of South Africa, that have changed. They've joined us. They are part and parcel of us. They are not racist. They decided to come before even the government mentioned this expropriation without compensation. They are on this side with us. We are working with them. Those that want to work with us, the doors are widely open. But those that don't want to work with us, and also those that are against the expropriation of land without compensation, we are going to take the land.
But Dr. Mchagi, my question is, and there's no doubt about it, that the injustices of the past must be addressed. We can all agree on that. There's no two ways about it. Apartheid and colonialism did rear its ugly head. But of course, I understand where Mr. Roets is coming from, where you can't just be punished because of the color of your skin. It just doesn't work that way. But number two, Dr. Mchagi, how do you make sure that when this expropriation does happen, there isn't an element of criminality that is going to be involved? So as the president of the Black Farmers Association, how do you make sure that members of your organization do not go ahead and commit criminality when this is happening? But of course, at the same time, how do you also go ahead and adhere to the Constitution of South Africa? Because that is something, as citizens of a democratic South Africa, that we are ruled by.
We are aware of the Constitution and we abide by the Constitution. There are other ways of dealing with this. The quickest route is for us to call for the government to vote on that if they are stuck with it, you know. So the land, the research have shown it was FF Plus and AfriForum, I think the two that were against, and the DA that were against the land expropriation without compensation. The rest of the other parties that were part and parcel of this expropriation without compensation agreed that the land should be expropriated. And it's not going to affect our economy. No, it will never affect it. Instead, it's going to boost the economy, because our people need land in order to boost the economy, you see. So, Mr. Rhodes, I don't want to entertain him when he says the land must not be taken. Whereas the banks have started the expropriation of land, taking black people's land, the banks, you see. So we are not going to cater for nobody, even the banks, even if the land belongs to the bank. That land, if the government agrees that it must be taken, we will take the land.
Mr. Rhodes,
so that the scale can be balanced. Without land, you are nothing. We need to get to our hands to the land so that our counterparts can also respect us and see us as human beings, not seeing us the other way, like we mean nothing in the world, you know? That is the way of making transformation to be in action and active.
Mr. Rhodes, I want to bring you in. So what we don't want, and I think all three of us can agree on that, is that we do not want criminality to be part of the process if this does ever happen or whenever it does happen. So what does government need to do? And how is AfriForum communicated with government in making sure that there isn't some sort of a bloody transition when or if this does ever happen? So what is your take on that, and what needs to happen from government's perspective to make sure that bloodshed is not the key word when whatever transition happens within South Africa?
Well, I think one of the things that needs to happen is government should be responsible about this, and they should not entertain extremist views like that of Dr. Umchage, who's flirting with violence and romance and romanticizing violence on farms. For someone who claims to be not politically aligned, he seems to be extremely politically inclined, at least, because everything he said in this interview was political, ideological speak. It's not practical. How do we deal with farm murders? And I mean, we've seen this story play out. This thing about, no, we're going to do expropriation without compensation and it's going to be good for the economy. I mean, we've heard this story before. It's like saying we're going to expand KFC aggressively and no chickens are going to be harmed in the process. The two don't speak to each other. I mean, we've seen the story. We've seen what happened in Zimbabwe. We saw what happened in the Soviet Union with farms when they took the farms. We saw what happened under Mao Zedong in communist China. We saw what happened in Venezuela more recently. And we know the story. So if they do this, it's going to happen. The economy is going to collapse. And you know what's going to happen next? People who make these claims, such as Dr. Umchage, are going to turn to the United States and then blame the Western powers for everything that's wrong with the country. We've seen this. It's the same story that plays out all over again. So let's at least be upfront and predict what's going to happen. So we can wait for America to be blamed once the economy crashes as a result of these ridiculous economic policies.
Gentlemen, one last question for both of you as we wrap up the conversation. Dr. Umchage, again, how do we now find that balance of making sure that the communication is there between farm workers and the laborers in making sure that whatever attacks happen on the farms, that there is a united front in making sure that this stops? Because there is no doubt that farm murders are going to affect the bread basket of South Africa. It's going to affect food supply within South Africa. And we don't need that right now. We haven't had rain in Gauteng for quite a few weeks, and adding to that makes it much worse for there to be food security in South Africa. So Dr. Umchage and Mr. Rhodes, and I'm going to start off with Dr. Umchage, how do we strike that balance in making sure that farm murders do not become a topic that we are going to be discussing a year from now?
Okay, a quick one. I just want to go back to Mr. Rhodes. Mr. Rhodes, let me tell you something. Your comments are displaying that white people are the only ones that can farm with the land. Because you are saying now, if the land is taken from the whites, the economy is going to collapse. That's not true. That's not true. Don't display your, you see, you've just accusing me of being a politician and that. I'm not a politician. And I was never a politician. I'm fighting for what is due to me and my people. As a farmer, black farmers can do better because on these farms, it's black farmers that are working there. It's not about white farmers. If the land is taken, that is just a threat. Let us put it in the test. What happened in Zimbabwe happened in Zimbabwe. What happened wherever it happened in that country, this is South Africa. We are all here to make things to work right. You see?
Real socialism.
You need to go and tell your people they need to work with the black people or work with the system of the black people. Going back to the answer of violence and that, there will be no violence in this transaction. It will be a smooth transaction. It will be monitored by the government and by ourselves to make sure that also the land will go to the rightful people that are skilled to work with the land. As we know what happened in Zimbabwe, it will not happen here. Here in South Africa, we are doing things different. Skills are transferred and people are taught how to plant and how to work with animals, all those things. So I think there will be no problem. There's no risk in this. Let the process take place. Thank you.
Mr. Roots, you got 1 minute just to wrap up with regards to the farm murders and killings and that united front that needs to be shown in order to make sure that a year's time we're not talking about this again.
Yeah, well, I think what Dr. Mchagi said now could have made sense if the Department of Agriculture hasn't said themselves that more than 90% of their land reform projects have failed. So for some reason, he believes that if we just have the same policy more aggressively, we're not going to have a more aggressive failure. And it has nothing to do with black people not being able to farm. We have excellent black farmers in this country. It's about bad economic policy. That's the point, regardless of race. And when we talk about farm murders, we need to have a comprehensive solution. It has to be prioritized by the South African government. It should be responded to with a focused counter strategy. There must be a holistic approach, which includes that we need probably better legislation. It must be a priority of the hawks, and politicians who romanticize violence on farms have to be held accountable for that.
Dr. Lennox Mchagi, the President of the Black Farmers Association of South Africa, and Mr. Ernst Roots, the AfriForum of Head of Policy. Gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time for us.
Thank you very much.
Now, there we go. Well, of course, as the discussion rages on, one needs to find a solution in making sure that the breadbasket of South Africa is maintained, because at the end of the day, it is you and I at home that is not going to be getting your needs, the needs that keep us going, the needs that we survive as human beings. And if that does not happen, then poverty and hunger will become the order of the day. So there needs to be a solution from government, from gentlemen like Mr. Roots and Dr. Mchagi, sitting down and making sure that there can be a solution to halting the farm attacks and murders that are currently engulfing South Africa. Well, this has been another excellent edition of A Truth to Power right here on ITV Networks. I will see you again, same time, same place. Do have yourself a fantastic week and weekend. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.